Conservation Commission meeting of January 7th, 2025, 7:30 p.m. I'm going to chair the meeting tonight. It looks like Sarah's not going to be able to join us. See, we've got a number of participants in the attendees list. Want to remind folks, raise your hand if you have a comment. We'll pull you in if you have a comment on something, particularly as we go through the administrative discussion. The agenda tonight is the first 15 minutes. We're going to go through some administrative items, requests for certificates of compliance and CPC applications, some other items. And then 7:45, we've got 151 Taylor. At 8, we've got 91 Mattawanakee. And then at 8:05, we've got 15 Powers, but I don't think we're going to spend much time on that one. That'll probably be continued. So with that, Tim, do you want to start out with, well, let me say this first. Are there any additions to the administrative discussion agenda that folks have?
I have two.
Okay.
The Scout project, putting up regs on plywood at some of the trailheads that don't have kiosks. And then the other one is the water department is going to be submitting an NOI for their turtle nesting habitat sites and their ephemeral pool creation, but we can get into that later.
Okay. That sounds good. I also have one thing to add, which is also Scout related. Boy Scout Troop 1 has asked me to bring up that they would like a permit to camp at Newtown Hill on January 24th. So it's a little tight. I think they made a mistake. They didn't understand the timeline of things. So I wanted to chat with folks about that, make sure there are no major issues, and then I can work with them to get it submitted.
You mean Newtown Hill as in the water tower? That hill? Behind the AT&T?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
Okay, we'll add those three. Any other additions to the administrative items?
Yeah, I was curious if we could get an update on Healy Corner again. I don't know if you have anything to. They're certainly working there. I just don't know what they're doing. Stuff that's out from the road. But okay. I don't know if we've heard from them.
We'll add that to the discussion. Okay, let's move into minutes. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to the minutes of December 10th, 2024?
I just had a quick one under the CPC application. So we'll be doing an eligibility and funding request for both projects. I think in the minutes it just said eligibility. So it'll be eligibility and funding.
Which we'll discuss in a few minutes. So we can make that change. Anything else to the minutes? Then can we get a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I'll make a motion that the commission approve the meeting minutes of December 10th, 2024 as amended.
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made by Andrew, seconded by Michael. Andrew, can you take a roll call?
Roll call vote. Ed.
Ed Foltz, aye.
Michael.
Michael Livingston, aye.
Kyle.
Kyle Maxwell, aye.
Carl.
Al Melberg, aye.
And myself, aye. It's unanimous.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Tim, do you want to take us through the administrative items, but maybe give deference to those items that may have people here to discuss, and we can push other things out like
Yeah. Frankly, I'm not sure what a lot of people are here for. But I'll do my best. Yeah. So 149 Tehadawon, we do have Nick Burse here to speak about some of the work in the backyard. So I'll allow him to talk, and I'll share my screen. I've got a little site walk report from what we'll be talking about.
Okay.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Nick.
Cool. Yeah, so the I don't know, Tim, if you want to pull up the picture that you were just
Yeah,
talking
I'm
about.
trying right now. It's giving me some issues. Give me 1 second, but feel free to start off if you'd like. All right, here we go.
Yeah, so I live on Tadawon. My property abuts the conservation land in the back. So we moved here in December of 22. And then we noticed there's a boardwalk. I don't know if you want to scroll to that picture quick if you have it. I have a zoomed in picture on mine. That we noticed right away in the winter because it was all clear. In the spring of 23, we've seen wildlife go back and forth there plenty of times. And I was mowing lawn and I saw flagstones that you could see clearly in the picture here, going from my property into the conservation land, which I thought was very interesting. So what I did is I raked away the area and raised the flagstone. It was covered by maybe like 1/4 of an inch of dirt. So since Tim reached out, I removed the flagstones. Again, they were already there, but that's the only action I've taken. The boardwalk is still there. I can't remove that myself.
So the boardwalk, at the end of the stones, the boardwalk starts and it continues back onto Browns Woods property and into the wetland.
Yeah, I would guess it's probably like 20 feet long and maybe like 1.5 ish or so wide. I didn't measure it. This is just me guessing what it is.
And I guess step back for 1 second, Tim. What's the question in front of us here?
Wanted to see how you guys wanted to go about this. I know Nick mentioned he already did some work pulling out the stones, but there still exists the boardwalk back there. And wasn't sure how you guys wanted to go about that.
Go about what?
Because so the wetland line, it's hard to see here, but it runs right about here. I mean, it's an unpermitted boardwalk that goes back into the wetland. So I mean, technically, it is fill. Nick said it was there before he got there, so I wasn't sure. I didn't want to make the call on telling Nick how to go about this. I wanted to see how you guys felt about it.
Sure. So the question in front of us is, does that boardwalk need to be removed?
Well, what does it lead to?
It really doesn't lead to much. You kind of hit a wall of vegetation at the end of it. There's no
Yeah,
view or
I've walked
anything.
to the end of it, and then it just, when there's actually water, just water and reeds and things like that, it just stops.
Yeah, this is the Phragmites area back here that we've been treating for the last, I think, 3 or 4 years.
What condition is the boardwalk in, Nick?
I would say mild. It's a little uneven. You can walk on it, and like the snakes, I've seen snakes and other things use it, but I haven't. It's not in great condition, but not falling apart either.
Is it on Concom property?
Yeah, it's on Browns Woods property. So you can see the property line is here. This is all Browns Woods.
I would say if we didn't build it, we probably shouldn't let the public use it in case an accident happens.
So you'd be in favor of taking it out, Carl?
Well, yeah, I would. Yeah.
Yeah, I was inclined to say it's there, just leave it alone.
Okay, we got 2 different opinions here. Straw poll, where's everybody else at on this?
Nick, do you want to see it removed?
I don't use it. I don't need it removed either. Like I said, I've seen deer and I haven't said that yet. I've seen deer and snakes use it. It's not accessible from the Brownswoods trails because of the swamp landscape there.
So that's what I was going to say. I understand the potential hazard or liability, but if it's not a realistic hazard, then are we going to do more damage by going in there and trying to take this thing up?
And if the animals are using it, the snakes at a minimum, then now we're taking habitat away.
I'm more inclined to say leave it. It doesn't sound like it's usable or that's going to cause public issue. If it was at the end of a trail that led to
Yeah.
Nick's backyard, and where people would start to wander into his backyard, that'd be a different story.
So I guess it's kind of tricky because SVT holds the CR on Browns Woods, right? So we didn't even realize this was there until me and somebody from SVT went out and we were walking the CR bounds, doing the annual monitoring. So I'm not sure how they would feel about it being kept there.
Okay. I mean, my 2 cents here, Tim, is we should understand the sense of the commission, and then what I would ask you to do is coordinate with SVT. If SVT as the CR holder is adamant that it needs to come out, I think we should respect that as the CR holder. That's their role.
Okay.
If the commission's opinion is it should also come out, then great, we're all aligned. If the commission's opinion is it can stay in place, maybe that matters to SVT and maybe it doesn't. So what I've heard right now is Kyle and Ed are comfortable with it staying in general. Carl would like it to go. Michael and Andrew, where you guys stand on this?
I'm more inclined to probably leave it if it's not anywhere near any existing trails, so nobody's gonna put their foot through it, and yeah, maybe it'll do more damage if we do remove it.
I'm just wondering why is it there to begin with? And it seems like it's something that the previous owner put in place to, go and look at the snakes, or, was it possible to fish there at one point and it's overgrown now? Or, if it's not accessible from Browns Woods, why not leave it if it's not causing any other harm?
Okay. So it sounds like we've got a majority in favor of leaving it in place. I guess what I would ask you to do, Tim, then is coordinate with SVT to get their sense of it. Nick, I don't know if Tim or Amy has sort of explained the role of SVT here, but as the conservation restriction holder, they're responsible for making sure that we follow through on the conservation elements of this. So what we're going to do is sort of put this on pause, see if SVT is comfortable with it staying. If they're not, then we'll revisit this discussion and find a way to get it removed. I think if they are comfortable leaving it, then as long as you're okay with it, we would all just agree to leave it in place.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I'm good either way.
Okay. Tim, follow up with Nick then after you hear from SVT and we can figure out where to go.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Tim, we got a couple minutes to take on a short thing here.
Yeah, why don't we just go through the certificate of compliances? 18 Ivy, I went out there 2 weeks ago. That was just a septic. Everything's stabilized. It's good to go.
Okay. We're gonna motion to issue the COC for 18 Ivy.
Motion to issue a certificate of compliance for 18 Ivy.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Andrew,
Roll call vote. Michael,
Michael Livingston, aye.
Kyle,
Al Maxfield, aye.
Ed,
Ed full time.
Chase,
Chase Gerwig, guy.
Carl,
I'm a Melbourne guy.
myself, I. It's unanimous.
All right, and the next one is Town Fair Tire. I went out there last week, and again, stable. Work's been done. It's good to go.
Is the wildlife fence back there in good
Yes.
condition?
It is. Yep.
So we get a motion on this one, please.
I move that we approve the certificate of compliance for 499 Great Road 2040853.
Second.
Andrew, it's all yours.
Roll call vote. Michael,
Michael Livingston, aye.
Ed,
Ed full time.
Kyle,
Al Maxfield, aye.
Carl,
Carl Melbourne guy.
Chase,
Chase Gerwig, guy.
and myself, I. It's unanimous.
Very good. We're going to suspend this administrative discussion and open up the continued public hearing for the notice of intent at 151 Taylor Street, Mass DEP number 204-1011. Who is here to speak to that one? Dean, here we go.
Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Okay, great. I do have a couple other teammates who will be presenting alongside me. We have Jonathan from Amazon and Ryan Graham from my team at Kimley Horn. And then we have a couple of folks from LELW as well. If they could all just raise their hand in the lobby, might be easiest that way. I'll lower my.
I believe I was just added, if you all can hear me.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm adding you guys right now.
Thank you very much.
Dean, I'm going to promote you to a panelist, so you can share your screen if needed.
Okay. Looks like we've got David from LELW. We've got Ryan from Kimley. Do we have Jonathan from Amazon in the lobby, Tim? Oh, we got him.
Yep.
Yes.
He's here.
His panelist too.
Okay. Looks like we got everyone. All right. Awesome. Well, good evening to the commission. We're here back in front of you guys again. I'm going to give just a little bit of synopsis on some background just for the commission of the project, just very high level, and then get into a little bit more of the details about the information that we've gathered since our last appearance, and just make sure that the commission has an understanding of what our application now includes. And we'll hear a little bit from the other members of the group. So as a reminder for this project, the scope consists of 83 level 2 charging stations, 2 DC fast charging stations in the existing parking lot to serve charging infrastructure for the transition of fleet vehicles to fully electric for the delivery vans. Also, as a part of this project, associated electrical infrastructure for power delivery is required, and for those aforementioned charging stations, as we detail on the construction drawings. The greater portion of this project is done in partnership with LELW, the Municipal Electric and Light Department, for the power delivery to serve those said charging stations via a utility-owned underground electrical line, utility-owned medium voltage switchgear, and utility-owned 2500 kVA medium voltage transformers tied into an existing service at the manhole, which is in the 50-foot wetland buffer, which is why the reason that we're here in front of you guys today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just to provide a little bit of a visual while I'm talking. So again, this is the overall site, and we're talking about the area in question, which is up in this zone. Since our last appearance before your team, we have actually retained some environmental professionals to do a field wetland delineation to make sure that we had that line work correct, and we are being as accurate as possible about the disturbance within the 50-foot buffer and within the 100-foot buffer. So after having retained those environmental professionals doing the wetland delineation out in the field, which has been verified by Tim and Amy with a field verification site visit, our disturbance in the 50-foot wetland buffer is slightly actually less than what we had originally come in with in our application. So as it shows in our comment response letter and our overall cover letter, our disturbance within the 50-foot wetland buffer now is 495 square feet, and disturbance within the 100-foot wetland buffer is 3,445 square feet. Our limits of disturbance number does not change because of that. Of course, our tree clearing number does not change because of that. The scope of our project isn't changing. We just wanted to be sure that we had the most accurate line work and that it was verified by the town of Littleton to be sure that we had the most accurate numbers on there.
Dean, can I interrupt you for 1 second? Just ask Tim if there were any meaningful observations when you went out to confirm that line.
No, the line looks good. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Dean.
Great. So I'm gonna actually turn the presentation for a moment over to Jonathan with Amazon, who will just give a small background about the project before I get into some of the more detailed nuances about some of the responses from the comments that were made at the last hearing. So Jonathan, you wouldn't mind just giving a quick summary.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Greeley. I lead Amazon's economic development work in New England. I'm based here and live in Boston. I just tonight, first of all, excited to be here. I know we've appeared before the commission before, and you guys gave us some homework. I think we're back having done the work, answered the questions, and are excited to be talking about this next phase of the project. I think we've got a positive history of collaboration with the town broadly, but also this commission, just in the history of the project and some of the work we've done together to think about clean drinking water. So we're thrilled to be here with another environmentally focused project. And I just want to make sure you knew how excited we were about this opportunity and taking those steps. And so I'm happy to just kind of let the team jump into the presentation and get into the technical details, but just wanted to let you know that if you've got broader Amazon questions, happy to take them and happy to kind of be part of the conversation tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. So I'll run through a couple of the comments and our responses to those that were raised the last time. One of the larger comments that I know Chase brought up was about the tree planting and the area in which we were planting those trees. So Chase, we took in your comment. We've now revised the locations of those trees completely out of that septic system area. We gave an offset from the boundaries of that septic system based on how it was surveyed. Again, we're still providing the total DBH of 90 inches by planting 60 trees with 1.5 inch DBH. So we're meeting that request there as well.
Okay, thank you. Dean, could you show us where you intend to do that replanting?
Yes.
And can you remind me, Dean, how many trees are we taking down?
So we're taking down 6 trees that have a DBH over, I believe 6 inches was the threshold. And we are clearing, here it's in this table here, tree clearing within the 50-foot wetland buffer, 0 square feet, tree clearing within the 100-foot wetland buffer, 2,372 square feet. And we were specifically asked to provide a equal value to the DBH of trees being removed over 6 inches. So that is what this exhibit here on sheet L 1.0 is supposed to depict. These are the larger trees that we are going to be removing for this project to be able to get the interconnection line into this manhole. And the hatched area you see in this sort of tan color is our tree clearing limits, and our actually there are easement limits as well, but for the purposes of the question, those are our tree clearing limits. And Chase, to answer your question, these are the areas that we're proposing to replant the trees. So we gave a 20-foot offset from the outside extents of that septic system based on where it was surveyed. And we're proposing trees to be planted in those areas, as well as down in the southern area adjacent to the parking area there, as you see on the screen.
And Dean, I'm going to apologize to you twice here because I'm going to ask questions that maybe if I'd been thinking I would have asked before. But the first is the ability to replant trees within the corridor that you're clearing. What do you plan for restoration in that corridor?
So we actually did think about this in terms of like forest restoration within that corridor, and we found that it would be, well, so we have an internal landscape architecture team that put this plan together, and we worked pretty closely with them on the decision to actually not plant trees within that corridor because it would be pretty difficult to get them to grow. And the amount of trees that we're proposing to be planted on site, I think, allows for, if if the overall goal is to have trees in replacement of ones that we are taking down, I think the amount of trees that we're proposing throughout the site here is a much better design than trying to restore that area underneath. We took a look at doing, because the easement distance, we need to keep that clear for maintenance, right? And we looked at on either side, perhaps planting like an 8-foot swath of forest restoration. And we felt that that was going to be difficult to grow and it wouldn't really be purposeful for what you guys were trying to achieve with that request. So we felt this was sufficient. So we actually had looked at that, Chase.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Well, I guess one follow-up question then in this, this is sort of riffing on this idea is what would the restoration of that corridor look like? Would you be planting pollinator species within that are low to the ground? Would you be planting shrubs? Would you just allow it to revegetate naturally? What are you thinking for that corridor?
Our plan was to let it revegetate naturally. We could plant a pollinator species in there if that's something that the board or the commission would like to request. I think LELWD would also need to weigh in on that decision as it would be in their maintenance area, and they would need to, be able to get in there and maintain that. So we wouldn't, obviously want to shrub it or do anything like that to prevent maintenance. But I think we're open to suggestions from the commission. I think we were proposing to allow it to revegetate naturally. We could do a pollinator species if that's what the commission sees fit.
Okay, let's put a pin in that, and I'll let you keep going because I imagine you got some other things to go through here.
Yeah. Okay.
Before you do though, Dean, if I may, you said
Sure.
that it would be difficult to get things to grow, but things are growing there now. So why would it be difficult to get things to grow?
Well, so when we want to come in and we want to plant trees with understory trees with large shaded regions above top, it's difficult to get those plants to take in a situation like that where there's not direct sunlight. It's not potentially an area where water can be easily brought there and the plants to be watered. So it's just a much more difficult area for understory trees to be placed. And we felt that the proposed design that we have in front of you here, it puts forth the intent of the request from the commission that we felt would be best.
Okay, thanks.
I have one quick question, Dean. The replanting area towards the bottom left, over by the left small parking area. Yep, further to the left. Those trees right there. Has that location been? Have you guys coordinated with LELWD on that location? Because I believe they have a gate there that allows them to access the well way back off to the left. You can't see it, but I think they have a gate that gives them access, and they use that to get back there.
LELWD has seen these plans. I don't know if David, you want to weigh in on that at all?
Yeah, we do have a gate going in that location, a new permanent automated gate. I don't have the drawings on hand now to verify if those encroach on that gate, but we can look into that further.
Dean, would you agree though, in general, even if you couldn't plant, I don't know, what is it, a dozen, 15 trees there, that you've got other space here that you could utilize for replanting? Or would that be, if you couldn't put trees there, you kind of out of luck for replanting equivalent DBH?
I think there are other areas, and a big part of the reasons that we chose to place, well, I'll say, but the big part of the reason that we chose to place trees in these areas is because there were other areas that were designated to tree planting for that larger well project that we wanted to respect and stay out of. And so I think we could find areas. I don't know exactly where on this plan that gate sits, so we could be flexible with those trees, I guess is my answer to some extent.
You've also got them pretty tightly packed in there.
We do. Yeah, they're 1.5-inch DBH trees, so they are
going to grow. So
they are going to grow.
Kind of feels like there's too many in that little space. when you
Yeah,
consider maturity.
I would expect over time, Ed, some of those would die off and some would grow up more significantly.
Wouldn't the die-offs need to be replaced?
I think it depends on whether
We've talked about that on other projects, so, monitoring for a couple of years, and if they die off, replacing them. So. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure we're going to put a pin in the landscaping. We can come back to it, I guess. I did want to go through probably the more extensive piece of what I wanted to go through this evening with the commission here was the alternatives. Because I know that was a big piece that the commission felt we didn't provide enough detail on the last time we presented. So I think based on what we've provided now, and I'm hoping some folks to the commission have had a chance to review our comment response memo. And so I'll go through it here in some detail with the commission, and I'll open it up for questions on those pieces after. So one of the alternatives that we were asked to take a look at was providing service from, and let me actually go to a different plan sheet here. Was providing service from across the causeway here, this heated bridge to a point of interconnection. Let me just bring over this exhibit. I think this would help a little bit more. So the first option that we were asked to look at was taking the point of interconnection from east of our EV charging installation area, or the parking lot, which you're seeing off to the west here in this diagram. Bring it back west and across this heated causeway. And the reason that we gave for that option not being feasible for us was mainly due to voltage drop and just general infeasibility. And so I've got Ryan on the line here who can give some detail about this option, and a little bit more detail on what infrastructure would need to be placed, what disturbance would need to be had in order for us to do this. And hopefully that will give a little bit more detail and background on how this option was looked at and was not chosen for our design.
Yeah, happy to jump in, Dean. So yeah, we looked at 3 different options, and this was in partnership with the LELWD. So as part of this, we factored in, their existing infrastructure and how they could upgrade to provide the electrical, capacity needed to serve the chargers, right? And so that was part of the consideration, as was environmental impact. So to Dean's point, we looked at 2 options originally, both of which would have crossed the heated causeway, both of which were deemed infeasible due to the causeway. And if you look at the comment response letter, then you can scroll down a little bit. So this is the first route. And if you go to the next page, there's a second route. Again, those are 2 different electrical options. Both would have crossed the causeway. And then below this, Dean, just below the picture here, this paragraph one more up. This paragraph right here really clearly details, or at least we tried to, why that can't happen, right? So if you look at that heated causeway, it's 7 inches thick itself. And then in the standard details, which we shared with your team from the previous design engineer, it states that goes from 0 to 42 inches deep. And from there, we deducted that depth from the top of the roadway. We also deducted the fact that there's a 24-inch culvert underneath that. And we highlight all of these elevations in this write-up. And essentially what you get is only 6 inches clear between the bottom of that and the top of the pipe, which isn't feasible even for the conduit to fit in the first place, right? Because it has to be encased under that sort of weight. And secondly, just completely infeasible to dig underneath existing infrastructure like that, support it, and thread that needle anyway. So really just made it not feasible for that installation standpoint to fit physically. And then secondly, this would be, if this was the route, this would be accepted by LWD as their infrastructure. It would require an easement around it, and is not allowed for all this private infrastructure and all these conduits to do in their easement, because if they would need to go back and fix it or update it later, they wouldn't have direct access to that, right? So I just wanted to highlight that really clearly, and happy to answer any questions about it. But that's really why we couldn't cross the heated causeway. And further, for the option 3 that we decided on and we thought was the least impact, because one, we're tying into a manhole, which is actually stubbed to create a new route, which we're tying into, right? We'll show in the next comment that LELWD has a plan to extend electrical through the site anyway, and we are essentially tying into a portion of that, and it actually has less impacts to the surrounding wetlands because of that, right? To the buffer, I should say, not to the wetlands themselves. And so with all those things together, the technical infeasibility, the alignment with the LWD plan, and the fact that we're actually having less impacts of the buffers pushed us to option 3 from the beginning. And we wanted to make sure we showed the commission all of the background data for that. I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
Ryan, would you mind just touching on the route specifically and the additional switch gear or the additional feed that we would need to bring into the building, or why the building itself wouldn't have the power there?
Sure, I'm not sure that level of detail is super applicable, to be totally honest, but I'm happy to go through it. Essentially, we were debating how this was going to be fed electrically, as Dave and Nelly, LWT, had to figure out how they're going to serve us power-wise. And there was one scenario where we were upgrading the building feed, and there was one scenario where we weren't. And so that's what option 1 and option 2 was. And option 3, once we realized we couldn't do 1 or 2 because it wasn't feasible, we had to go with option 3, which didn't upgrade the building. So that's essentially the difference in those lines. And the different colors you see are the different routes that are tying into the point, where there is power today versus where we were at one time going to put a medium voltage switchgear, backfeed the building, provide EV load. Option 2, new transformer, upgraded transformer, serve the EV load across the bridge, not going medium voltage, not having a switchgear. Option 3, we just upgraded only the EV load, didn't touch the building load, and provided a new transformer for the EV load, essentially. I hope that helps explain.
I personally appreciate the much greater detail in this. One thing that I want to challenge you guys to think about here, though, is I think part of our frustration with this is that all of this could have been solved with a little bit of planning ahead and installation of additional conduits in that causeway. Understanding that that itself is water under the bridge, what I would challenge you to think about, though, is in the course of the next phase of this project, which we're permitting, presuming it's option 3, are you installing all of the conduit you could foreseeably need in the future? Because what we will not want to do is have to redig another trench through this after it's revegetated and everything like that. If you're talking about putting in some extra conduit that you don't know what it's going to serve yet, that could be a very smart investment. Just like putting additional conduit in this causeway would have been a smart thing to do a handful of years ago.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to touch on that. And Dean, feel free to jump in, or Jonathan. I totally hear where you're coming from. And I certainly understand that. I think the challenge is EV design isn't as simple as sticking a 6-inch conduit and you're good to go, right? What happens is the chargers that are used change. The equipment itself, as far as low voltage transformers, panel boards change, and therefore the orientation of the changes. So what we've actually found on several similar projects across the nation is when you stub up conduits and you think you can come back and use them later, it actually becomes even more challenging because a lot of the conduits either aren't sized for the new technology that's out there or they're not in the same configuration. I 100% understand where you're coming from. It's very logical. It just doesn't quite work that easily in practice, right? But with that said, what we have sized today is based upon projections from Amazon of their fleet growth for electric vehicles at this site and is the max build out that I am personally aware of today. And so, yes, we have tried to do that with this plan of attack. Is it possible other projects come in the future? Sure, but that is not the intent to only do little pieces, right? We do think holistically about this, and that's how we approach this project.
But am I correct here, though, that this project is only installing electrical charging stations on more or less half of the parking lot?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Is the conduit that you're proposing to install associated with option 3 sufficient to support, I don't know, the very foreseeable possibility of electrical charging stations through the entirety of the parking lot?
We would, no, conduit is not installed at every single parking space because at this point in time, and
I don't care what you guys do to your parking lot. What I care about is the wetland impacts to get from the transformer to the parking lot. What I don't want to do is dig this up again.
I'm with you. So from my perspective, I would think yes. And David, I'd love your feedback.
Yeah, Ryan, can I jump in here?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So let's step this back a little bit. So I do apologize from the Light and Water standpoint. We should have had the foresight to do this when we were in front of you guys for the Trumbull Well project. But that Trumbull Well feed is actually has to get back to Taylor Street, so that project really relies on this feed as well. And we struggled with both of these projects kind of being in design at the same time, one being led by members of the water department, one being led by members of the electric department. So I just think we were a little uncoordinated there in our efforts. But the option C, that corridor coming from Taylor Street in yellow there, all of that conduit would be light department property. We do install spares all the time in all of our installations. I think it would be wise to throw a few extra spares in there. It wouldn't hurt. And we could size that to fit our primary cable. With that being said, our primary cable is going to be coming to a piece of switchgear. And from that point, if there was any expansions on Amazon's end, that's where they would need additional infrastructure to, not necessarily through that corridor. So we will put additional conduits in the corridor. But from the water standpoint, I can't see Trumbull Well expanding. And from the rest of that parking lot standpoint, that should be completely sufficient to feed if they expand at all or change plans.
And to highlight, Chase, just to make sure we're all on the same page, where he's talking about that switch gear is right where those three lines meet. So everything would be run to that switch gear. And if a future upgrade would be needed of a lot of power, that would be the tie-in point, no longer back through the buffers that we're at, if that helps.
Yep. Yeah, that helps a lot. And just so you guys know, I spent some time with Dave and his team trying to understand, because one of the original arguments, and this is partly for the commissioners too, one of the original arguments that Amazon made is, oh, this is in the public benefit, and all that, I think, surprised us because we hadn't heard of the totality of this. I'm much more comfortable with the idea that these impacts within the 50 now are in the public benefit, and Amazon in some ways is sort of tagging along for the ride.
If I may, though, Chase, public or private, we're still decimating a natural habitat that, had this all been thought up long time ago, we wouldn't be doing this now. The habitat that's recovered and rebuilt is now going to get destroyed again. We're not putting it back the way it was. They've already said they're going to leave it open so that they can get in there and so forth. I'm personally not inclined, if a project such as here came and said, well, we need more, I'm personally not terribly excited about having that go through. So I'm not real excited about this project, to be honest with you. And I thought in the beginning there was 160 parking spaces for charging. But am I mistaken on that? Because it's 82 now? Am I just mistaken on that?
The amount of parking spaces hasn't changed in our application since the beginning.
Then I'm mistaken. I apologize.
No worries. I think to clarify there, it's the number of chargers because they're dual chargers. That may be the confusion.
Maybe that's why I'm confused then. All right.
And one quick thing, Ed, just to address your point, I totally hear you, understand where you're coming from. We want to be supportive of that. But one quick note about this causeway that I do want to remind folks is the reason this heated causeway was installed is to help with snow melt, to limit the amount of product that would be put down during those events, which would therefore pollute the wetland, right? So that was intentional and installed that way. And at that point in time, I don't know that LELWD would have accepted their major electrical run under that anyway. So I'm just saying, I don't think it's quite as cut and dry as we might think it is here, because even if that was designed now, I'm not sure that would have occurred in the same manner anyway, because they wouldn't allow private infrastructure on top of their public line. Just being transparent and putting that view of thinking out there.
All right.
So I think we've covered the sort of the alternative feasibility study piece of this, where we've got two options through the causeway and one option, which is what you're recommending, which was the original plan that involves taking down trees. Any other commissioners have comments or questions on that before we turn it back over to Dean and Ryan to sort of take us through the next steps?
do. I'm just not sure if it'll get covered under the next steps. Are we going to discuss how this work is going to be performed?
I was presuming that was going to be the next step, but
Okay.
Yep, that is one of our next steps.
go ahead.
I've heard a couple
Dean.
times talking
Oh.
about this piggybacking on another project. And have we talked about what that means, or will there be additional changes? Or is that something that you're going to bring up as we go forward here?
Well, I think the larger project that we've been alluding to is what you're seeing on the screen here, if I'm not mistaken, Michael, to your question. Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Okay, I thought it had something to do with the water division needing power for the wells or something like that. I could be making it up too, but I've heard it a couple times, and I'm just curious about that.
No, I think that is correct, and that's what David was describing earlier about the overall project of where this power is coming from and where it's going, and how we, as a part of this application, are tying in to that larger utility extension project at this point here that's circled, and so I think that's what David was describing earlier.
Okay, so this is taking care of both projects, essentially, the charging and the future needs of the water company.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. There was a comment raised about lighting on the charging station itself, which we looked into. The charging station indicator light is going to show a small dim green, red, or blue, depending on the charging status. It's not minimal. It doesn't carry a foot candle measurement. That's really measurable whatsoever. I think the question was in relation to impact on wildlife habitat or wildlife in some manner, and so we provided a response there for that. The next topic that I wanted to bring up was a point that was brought up very towards the end in a comment as we were kind of getting rushed off the room for discussion, was about the boring equipment and how that will be set. So I want to pull up an item that we had provided in our application this one last time around, which is the specification sheet for the horizontal directional drilling machine. So we don't, these are means and methods of construction, and so these are up to the contractor to kind of determine the appropriate equipment. But this is generally what we found that is going to be used for this type of a size of boring. And so, Kyle, if perhaps you've had an opportunity to review that, if not, I can go through generally the sizing of that equipment here. It's a pretty standard horizontal directional drilling machine. Its length 20 feet, width 89 inches, height 76 inches. And this is going to be used in order to run conduit underneath paved areas, so we can minimize disturbance and have and reduce full depth backfill for those conduit placements. And so I'll pull up here as well our erosion and sediment control plans. So these detail out our silt fencing and our tree protection, our limits of work, and how we plan to reduce the runoff of sediment during construction. And so I'll just run through here really quickly the bore locations. So we have here, after we get ourselves out of the wooded area, our bore pit location number 1. After we've had an opportunity to clear these woodlands, the bore operator will likely set up in this area, and they will pull conduit underneath this parking lot. We've put on our plans to be able to mark out existing utility locations and depths. The boring machine is able to clear those distances and go vertically underneath or above certain drainage lines. And then we plan to put the conduit to finish up here. And this is at the location that we were discussing before, where this is the utility owned switch gear. And then we'll have another boring location to bring us from this side of the parking lot across over to this side. And those are the only two boring runs that we're showing. The remainder of the installation of the conduit is shown on the plan to actually be run strategically in these middle areas of the parking lot, so that we can dig up these areas for laying conduit, and then we backfill it with a concrete, which acts also as our mountable surface for the anchors for the charging stations. So it's a little bit of a 2-in-1. So we're not just laying conduit and backfilling it for the purposes of just the conduit. We're running it in these areas at the heads of the stalls so that we can backfill and place concrete there and anchor those stations to the concrete.
And
additionally,
quick thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I know part of the comment too was about trenching versus boring in the area of the buffer to the page northeast, which is shown in the inset. And down there. And just want to highlight that explicitly to make sure that we're all on the same page here. I think one of the comments was, could that area be bored? Technically it could, but because of the steep slopes and all of the existing trees, it would actually be more impactful and cause more grading to bore than hand trench, because we would have to safely operate this boring machine. We'd essentially have to grade in, some roadway type paths for them to drive the boring machine on. And that would cause more clearing and more grading, as opposed to simply doing a hand trench and minimizing the grading in that area until we can get clear of those steep slopes and sensitive areas, and then bore to reduce the amount of disturbance thereafter. I just wanted to highlight that for the commission.
So, Ryan, that was part of why I wanted to put a pin in the discussion of tree replacement. I'm not sure I follow how creating an additional horizontal directional drilling pit near the transformer is more impactful than clearing an 8-foot wide swath all the way to the parking lot. Can you go through that again?
Absolutely.
I'm just not following along.
Absolutely. So it's not the additional pit at all. It's not the additional pit. The issue is, this is not as Dean mentioned the specs. It's not a small machine, right? This is the size of a large pickup truck that you're driving around operating, and the slopes to get down to where they'd be doing that work are steep. So they can't just drive it down there and work. It would be unsafe and not meet the steep slope requirements for that equipment. So to actually access that and serve it and do the bore pit down in that area, you would have to grade in access roadways down to that, which don't currently exist. And so that's what we're saying.
Right. Well, where are you saying that pit is going to be? Because I think the way that Chase and I are looking at it is that you'd have your pit at B1 where you put the entry pit, and then you would have an exit pit up at the transformer by Taylor Street.
And if you did that, you would actually impact the wetland, because we show a bend intentionally, right? And so with bore machines, you can typically bend one of two ways. You can bend vertically or you can bend horizontally, but doing both is not done with any kind of accuracy. It isn't really doable, right? And so if we bore straight from the manhole to the other location, you'd actually be impacting more and clip the edge of the wetland and be more in the buffer. So we elected to hand trench around further and then come back down, right? And so I thought you all were saying where that corner is, where the two paths meet, putting a bore pit there, kind of to the left, Dean. And that's what I'm saying. If you put another bore pit in there, which you have to run this route, that would be more disturbance to get there, if that makes sense.
But why not just go straight to why not just go from B1 straight to the transformer? I appreciate that you guys have a bend in it, but
because you'd be more into the wetland area. We're trying to stay out of that.
But you're
right.
You'd be coming underground.
You're directionally drilling underground. I don't care if you directionally drill through the wetland underground.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with that with the concerns that could happen with contingencies and issues that happen with blowouts.
Well, I think also the point that Ryan's trying to make is for us to be able to get a boring machine in here to receive that the staging area that we would also need to be creating, the grading that we would need to create to be able to operate that machine safely. and operate that machine effectively, would potentially create more disturbance to this area than what we're proposing to do right now with just a typical hand trench.
You keep saying a typical hand trench, like you're not clearing an 8-foot swath and taking up 90 inches of trees. I'm still struggling to understand how that is more impactful than clearing this entire area.
Well, we would have to get in here anyway to be able to place this machine. Is that maybe I'm misunderstanding?
You have access to that from
I would assume there would be
From
access
the
to
north.
Taylor Street, maybe. So,
Yeah, but again, guys, it's very, like, we can show you the site picture. It's very steep here,
Right,
right?
it's
And so
not just
someone
flat
walking
land,
down
right?
and hand trenching is one thing. Someone bringing a machine the size of a large pickup truck down a steep slope is a very different thing, right? And so that's the crux of the issue. It's really access and constructability as well. And again, this trench is really only 2 feet wide, right? We're just providing the ability for that trench to be dug back, and we would want to be conservative in that manner to make sure we're showing the worst case impact, right? Which is what we're trying to do here in this case as well.
The
Right? So
trench is 2 feet wide, but you're cutting 8 feet?
So the trench is 2 feet wide and it goes down approximately 3 feet, right? And so you have to tie it in at a graded slope to existing grade. And what we're saying is we are showing more trees, 6 trees, because we are not comfortable, as engineers do this all the time, is saying I can dig right up to a tree drip line, because it's not true. You typically, end up injuring the tree, which is why we're showing them to be replaced. We're not, I don't want you all to think this entire easement area that we're showing, we're not digging that all down 3 feet. That's not the intent of this. The intent of this is a 3 foot, 2 to 3 foot wide trench that's going through the middle of that. And the rest is actually reserved as easement to go to LELWD, and we're providing this clear working space. I just wanted to make that clarification. That's all.
Here's what it looks like, guys. It looks like where Amazon's infrastructure is going to be impacted, we can figure out how to directionally drill it. But where the town's ecological resources are impacted, to hell with it, cut the trees down. That's what it looks like here. And I'm still not convinced that you're making this sound like this is an incredibly steep slope. This is right off the highway. This is not like, I'm really struggling with how this is a technical impossibility when it's perfectly feasible to do it for the rest of the project.
I think the difference there is, Chase, the rest of the project where we're boring is currently asphalt and is flat, slopes less than 2%. The areas you're talking about are either existing trees, which to run a machine the size of a truck, you would have to cut down and grade, or you have to grade a safe path. So I think that's the difference. I can assure you that we look at all part of the site and actually closer at the sensitive areas than the already paved site. It's just the reality of the means and the methods of what it would take to actually install this. I understand where you're coming from. I'm just trying to, explain where our thought process there is. We're very much taking this into consideration and trying to propose what we feel is the best solution to mitigate as many impacts as we possibly can.
But even if you're doing a 2 foot by 3 foot trench, I still don't understand why you need to chop up 8 feet to do it. 8 feet wide. I'm having a difficulty. Once you said the 8 feet, I was like, okay, you want 2 feet, then wouldn't 4 feet be more logical? You go on a foot on each side and 2 feet in the hole, and you decrease now in half the impact. So I get, as an engineer, you want as much space as you can have. I understand that. You're trying to leave variances and buffers and all this other stuff. But in a sensitive area, that's not always an available option. So would a 4 foot space work to cut it, to dig a 2 foot trench?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I was responding to a statement that I was told we were showing 8 feet, and I was trying to clarify that we actually aren't. So I'm not sure I'm following that as. We're trying to keep this as small as we can. What I was trying to clarify is that limits of work is just that. It's a limit of area that folks would be working in. It's not meant to be that we're digging down that entire area to serve the trench. The trench is that really skinny 2 foot line that we're showing there. That's what I was trying to clarify.
So are you taking an 8-foot space to dig that 2-foot trench?
We are not digging an 8-foot wide trench to
No,
work
no,
and
no,
stand
no.
outside and
Are
dig it.
you cutting apart? Are you taking out
No.
8 feet of space in order
No,
to
sir.
be able to dig a 2-foot trench?
No, sir. That's clear working space for someone to access that trench from.
So you are clearing an 8-foot swath?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Okay. And a 4-foot would not be sufficient? You can walk down a 4-foot space, you can
Sure,
dig
but the trench would be in the middle. I mean,
Yeah, I
OSHA
get
typically
that,
wants you to
but
have
so-
about
so
3
you-
feet of clear space on each side of the trench, right?
All
And
right,
so 3 plus 3 plus 2 is how we get to 8.
all right.
I'm not comfortable with it, but I will I will in this case defer to your assessment that it's not feasible. And the reason that I'm willing to make that deferral is that you're talking about replacing one for one the diameter of trees that'll be taken out. I think that's a lot of trees to replace, but if your assessment is that doing that is a more reasonable and safer thing to do than directionally drill it, I guess I'll get out of your way here. But I'm not sure I agree with you. Kyle, do you have any other thoughts on this?
No, I think I agree with you for the most part. I'm getting a little bit more on. I still think a straight run is feasible. I know that we're getting closer to the wetland there, and that's where I would raise some concern. I know you've mentioned the equipment now, and when I brought this up initially, I had 10 seconds to bring it up at our last meeting, or the last meeting you were attended. My concern, I just want whatever contractor you end up going with, we want to see kind of their work plan and any sort of contingency for blowout, especially going through these resource areas or the buffers of the resource area. I've seen it happen too many times with blowouts through those boreholes and mud and whatnot ending up in streams and rivers. So that's my preliminary concern. That's why I'm a little bit more hesitant now, Chase, to really push for that straight line.
I think that's an important point, though, Tim. To the extent that we approve this, there needs to be a condition that there's a work plan submitted to the commission that addresses all of the directional drilling issues. Where's the mud going to be placed? What are the contingency plans? All of that stuff that can be done as a condition rather than be addressed now. The other thing I would want to note here is that with the amount of flowable fill or whatever you're using to backfill the trenches there, the concrete, we also need a plan that specifies where concrete trucks are going to be cleaned out so that that doesn't wash into resource areas and so on. Again, I think that can be conditioned rather than incorporated into the pre-approval plans. Okay, guys, I know last time we sort of rushed you off. We've now been at this for 45 minutes. We're half an hour past when we're supposed to pick up the next agenda item. Dean, is there anything else on your list that you think you need to cover? And then commission will discuss what you've put in front of us.
Nope, that was it. Chase, thanks.
Okay, very good. Commissioners, what questions do you all have?
I guess so. Real quick, I don't recall if we discussed it at their last hearing, or if Amy and Tim have had a chance to that replanting plan. I've seen pictures of plants now, but I haven't. Was there a list provided that Tim and Amy might have had a chance to look at of species to be replaced?
Dean, was it included somewhere in the plan?
Yes, we have
Yeah,
we have plant names. I can list them off here if you'd like. Kyle.
I'm pretty sure I saw. I'm asking. It was more, I guess, a question for Tim, where I want to make sure they're comfortable. I don't have that specialty where I can.
Okay.
That you have the appropriate plants being planted.
Yeah, we do. We're planting a mixture of sugar maple, sweet gum, sour gum, pine oak, American linden. We have it on the plans.
Yeah, again, I saw it on the plan. It was more of a prompt to to Tim to make sure they're comfortable with those
Yeah.
species.
I usually defer to Amy on that. She's
Yeah, it's
the
those sound
native
reasonable
expert,
from-
but
they sound reasonable from past
Yeah,
projects.
I think they're reasonable
Yeah.
species.
Oh, yeah. It's comfort.
I would also advocate for pollinators planted wherever possible.
I do like the idea of that through that easement area.
The easement area, yep.
It paradoxically, it'll actually create an interesting little niche ecosystem there.
Yeah.
It seems like a good location right off that parking area. I think it would do really well there. I'm sure it gets a ton of sun.
Mhm.
I think we do really well.
Dean, if I may, you mentioned the lights on the charging stations. What was the plan for mitigating that?
Well, my comments about the light was just to give information. There was a question at the last commission meeting
Right.
about whether or not the charging stations had lights on them. My
Okay.
response in that regard was to say that they do have small indicator lights on them to show when the charging is completed or when it's in progress or if it's charging or not. They're small lights. They don't have a measurable foot candle. They don't typically cast light far whatsoever. And that question that was raised at the prior meeting was in relation to natural wildlife. And I think birds maybe was mentioned or migratory, something related to migratory patterns.
So those indicator lights in their entirety, totality will not have any impact on the ambiance or the lighting or whatever the word I'm looking for. It won't make it brighter than it is today.
No.
Okay, thank you.
So what I would say, coming back to Carl's comment on a pollinator garden, is I think we should also add a condition to this, presuming we approve it, that a replanting plan is provided to the commission and approved by the commission as a condition, because Dean, it sounds like you do have maybe some trees that need to be moved to accommodate some gates. It is not my sense that needs to hold up a decision tonight, but I do think it needs to be addressed thoroughly, and that can be done through a condition rather than, kicking this down the road 2 more weeks.
Understood. Yeah, we can work with that.
And Dean and Jonathan, are you guys willing to add pollinator species to the replanting area within the swath that will be cleared?
Yep.
Okay. Please make sure that's in the replanting plan. Any other comments from the commission? Okay. So I guess we're at the part of the program where it's what's the pleasure of the board here?
I'm ready to make a movement unless anybody else has anything they want to talk about.
one quick thing. What timeline were you guys thinking for a monitoring period? 2 years, 3 years?
As long as we can get.
We're at a 3-year, and we've kind of settled on being a 3-year is our typical
Yeah.
monitoring plan at this point, unless there's some sort of circumstance that would indicate we need to be longer.
Right. And I think we've been willing to entertain petitions to shorten that monitoring period. I'm not sure we've granted any, but if everything looks great at 2 years, we're amenable to talking about it.
Yeah, so I have no qualm with that. If they come in at 2 years and show significant growth, then everything's fantastic through two winters and growing seasons. I'm sure I could entertain that, but I think on paper, I'm pretty comfortable with 3 years.
Okay.
Okay. I'm comfortable enough with this as well. So Kyle, maybe you want to give us a motion?
Where I will make a motion that we close a public hearing, additional order of conditions for 151 Taylor Street, DEP number 204-1011, including the bylaw waiver with the conditions that we've discussed, including the HDD work plans, concrete clean out locations, and then updating the replanting plan to include pollinators and any potential issues with the LEW gate access.
Second it.
All right. Roll call vote. Kyle,
Maxfield, aye.
Carl,
Homeover guy.
Ed,
With reluctance and full side.
Chase,
Chase Gervig, nay.
Michael,
Michael Livingston, aye.
and myself, I. So that was, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yays and 1 nay.
Very good. So at this point, guys, Tim and Amy will work on the order of conditions, and I think there's some homework to be done there to sort those out, but you're on the right path.
All right. Thank you.
very much.
Have a good
Thanks
evening.
all.
Thank you all.
Okay. With that, we are now going to move on to the notice of intent for 91 Mattawanakee Trail, Mass DEP file number 2041014.
Yeah, Kevin Eastman mentioned he wasn't ready to come back in. I think he was still talking to the engineer about a dry well or something similar to manage the stormwater. So he requested to be continued.
Okay. Very good. Continued Tim for what, 2 weeks?
Yeah, 2 weeks. Yep.
2 weeks. Very good. Okay. And then I think same story for the enforcement order of 15 Powers.
Yeah, John reached out to us about a week and a half ago, and he mentioned that he's traveling this week and he wasn't going to be able to attend the meeting.
Okay. But he's communicating with you. He's at least providing some things as we go.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. So that will be continued to January 21st as well.
Yes.
Okay. Coming back to administrative items. Next up on the administrative item list is transferring NAGOG Lot 107 discussions in the January 13th Select Board meeting. Tim, anything you want to lead in with us for here, or you want me to pick this one up?
Feel free, go for it.
Really not a lot to say, except as we had discussed with the Select Board at last town meeting, we're going to restart the process of the discussion of NAGOG Lot 107. What I don't anticipate the Select Board meeting on January 13th to be as any formal request, but rather to almost start this anew, right? Everything is water under the bridge. Let's start with, here's the Concom's vision for this land and the desire, and to bring it under the care, custody, and control of the Conservation Commission, and then at least begin to engage the Select Board in that process. I guess the question I have for you all is, in the intervening couple of months you've had to think about this, do you have any other visions for NAGOG Lot 107 that we haven't already discussed? In other words, essentially managing it in a way consistent with the way we manage other conservation land. Okay. Taking silence as consent. You're all welcome to that Select Board meeting. I plan on being there. I imagine Sarah will be there. And that will very much be a discussion, and then we'll report back after that with what the process will be.
Are we on the agenda for a specific time for that discussion yet?
The agenda actually hasn't been issued yet, and unless Tim has some inside knowledge in terms of the timing, I don't know.
I do not.
Okay.
Chase, are you doing the slides for that?
I wasn't going to do a lot of slides. I mean, we've got the ones from town meeting that show the outline of the property, and that's really all I plan on sort of showing, just to facilitate a discussion. But I can flip those back over your way, Tim, if that's helpful to you, so you can put it in Ryan's hands and he can put that into the packet for this one.
Yeah, definitely. That'd be great.
Okay. Cool. Next up, CPA application. Maybe Andrew, I'll give that over to you.
Sure. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at the very rough draft of our CPC applications for the new walkway or the walkway improvements at the Frog Pond, as well as the invasive plant control proposal. Have you guys had a chance to look at that yet?
Enough to know that it seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't say I scoured it.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I think, plenty that needs to get included. Then I would dive into it a little deeper. I read the project plan, and after that, I'm more curious to see costs and schedules and stuff like that. Honestly,
that's so currently I'm calling a ton of different land management companies to kind of get a rough quote to get us moving forward to hopefully get this approved at the next CPC meeting, if not the February one. But what we can do is, if you guys are comfortable with these applications and having me add the money after, or if you'd rather see these maybe a little more in depth with the figures, we can approve them at our next meeting and then put them on the February CPC meeting for approval. What do you guys think about that?
Do you have a ballpark idea, Andrew, of what you expect the numbers to be? Like, not down to the penny, but essentially, like, what I wouldn't want to do is say, yeah, we're good, and then find out it's $50,000, and they're like, whoa, no, that's not what we had in mind. You know?
Exactly, and that's what's kind of tricky about this particular project, because we do know what it takes to replace, like, or to put in boardwalks on our properties, but where this is like a very unique cobblestone walkway that is going to take a lot of site work because of the flooding, and to really put something in that's similar but not quite a cobblestone walkway that'll fall apart, it's going to take a lot of site work and
Could be
material.
expensive then, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, and I guess, and maybe this is what she was saying, but yeah, my hesitancy why I mentioned I would want to see the numbers is I don't want to blindly put our support behind something we haven't seen, and then CPC see it and say, "Whoa, what were they thinking? Supporting that, you know, if it's astronomically proportionate." I don't think that would happen necessarily, but
I think, Andrew, you made the case for why we need to see the numbers.
Absolutely.
Even a range that we could say, you know, as long as it's within this range.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what winds up coming up. I might have to do a couple of site visits with some prospective quote givers to really get a good number, but yeah, that sounds like a good path forward. I'll work on getting the numbers for both the invasive plant management and the walkway for our next meeting with a little more in-depth kind of facts and figures in the applications. And yeah, we'll get it on the February CPC agenda if everything looks good. And
that won't, because that doesn't really affect your path forward with this, right? If you don't have it on CPC's agenda this month. Okay.
What we can do is we can always put a placeholder if need be on the warrant and have CPC approve even probably mid-February if we had to, or hold a special meeting. But yeah, it should be good.
And I would say, I mean, reading the room here, Andrew, you could probably convey to CPC general support for the concept of the project. We just want to flesh out the details.
Absolutely. We probably don't want to propose some crazy figure, but we'll see what comes back. You never know these days.
Yeah, things can get spicy.
Give my wife a blank check, so.
One more thing on that, and thinking a little further down the road, when this, comes in front of you guys, notice intent for the walkway for sure. The invasive work, would you guys be okay with a RDA for that, or would you want to see an NOI as well?
I mean, I would probably package them all together into a single NOI.
Okay.
But if it was just the invasive work, I probably wouldn't care about an RDA.
That's a great question. I thought they were just coming in front of us together, so never.
I mean, certainly that could definitely be done. I didn't know if, for whatever reason, it could be beneficial to have them separate. But yeah, I mean, together works.
We'll leave that strategizing to you, Tim. If you think it makes sense to do it as two, then do it as two.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Next up, Tim, you have the scout project that we added to the administrative agenda.
Yep. So I did an inventory of all of the trailheads that we have leading onto our conservation land. And obviously a lot of them don't have kiosks, and it's going to be a while before we even get kiosks at the ones that need kiosks. And so to us, it makes sense to at least put the regulations, the conservation land regulations up at every trailhead. And so we reached out to scouts, I can't remember which ones, but they give us feedback that they are willing to, somebody there is willing to take on the project of posting all the regs at these trailheads on plywood and maybe even something else in addition to the regs, but the plywood wouldn't be really any bigger than putting two regular sheets of paper on it. When they'd be attached to trees. And obviously we make sure that trees have room to grow and, they're put up properly. So basically, if you guys have any objections to that.
Sounds great.
And
Yeah,
he,
it's a good idea.
All right.
Is someone going to go around periodically and replace any of that?
I mean, we kind of do, like, I wouldn't say regular trips to all the trailheads, but we do get out there a couple times per year, at least try to get to all of them a couple times per year, just to see if anything needs maintenance, any of the signboards, like there's a couple that need to be redone. But we do take kind of a throughout the year inventory at a slow pace of everything.
Okay.
All right, on to the next.
Yep. On to the next water department NOI.
All right, so I spoke with Matt Silverman, and they're getting ready to submit their notice of intents for, as a part of their Trumbull Well project. It was Natural Heritage that said they had to recreate the turtle nesting habitats, and we went out and I know some commissioners went out to the SVT property at Smith, where they have the proposed location there, and the other one at right near the Trumbull Well, that like knoll back there. So they're getting ready to submit notice of intents for those, and also for the work includes it's an ephemeral pool that they have to create back adjacent to the monarch turtle nesting habitat that they created. And the water department would like to do them all separately, even the two on the Trumbull site. They wanted to make sure that that's okay with you guys. Instead of baking in the ephemeral pool creation with the turtle nesting habitat on the Trumbull Well site, since it's the same property.
I'm going to turn that right back on you, Tim. Do you and Amy have any concerns?
No, I mean, I don't. It was more so having multiple orders of conditions open at the same time on a single property was where my head went when I heard that.
Okay, sort of an administrative headache.
Yeah.
Well, we don't usually. I thought that was a big no-no, having multiple orders open on one property. Isn't that I thought that was a DEP thing.
I'm not sure. I could check with Amy on that.
Because we had this happen recently where there was a very outdated order that had never been cleaned up. And what project was that? And they came back in. I would have that discussion. I think your gut was telling you that for a reason. I think that it's something to do.
Yeah, I mean, from a purely technical perspective, I'm sort of indifferent, but from an administrative and making sure it's done right perspective, I'd be interested to know what you and Amy think.
Okay. Yeah. I'll check on that. In the event that it turns out to be okay to have, multiple orders open at the same time on the same property, you guys would be okay with all three of these being submitted separately? Or
I don't see an issue.
Will there be any impact, positive or negatively, on the turtles by doing the project separately?
I don't believe so. No, I mean they're
strictly administrative.
I think they're technically on the same property, but they're not in the same. Like they're far apart where that work. That pool is not going anywhere close to where that turtle habitat area is going to be created by the well.
It's like Massachusetts versus Ohio, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and even access for each of those are probably going to be very different. It might make sense logistically for them to show it as three different projects.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'll check on that and make sure that's okay.
And then the last thing that I had was Boy Scout Troop 1, and their interest in camping on Newtown Hill again on January 24th. I think they did this last year. The timing, the application hasn't been submitted. It will be submitted by our next meeting, but that meeting is 3 or 4 days before they will be out there camping. So I wanted to take everyone's temperature to see if there were any major concerns with allowing the scouts to go up there and camp again. And if there are, what those concerns might be. And if there aren't concerns, then we'll just take it up on the 21st and presumably approve it. But I wanted to be able to give them some indication about whether or not they would likely be able to camp.
So I don't recall them doing this in the past, and that doesn't mean anything. But what, I guess, where do they camp?
Essentially the top of the hill in the
Okay.
field.
So they're in the field. Okay. And do
Yep.
we have any idea what their overall plans are? What the intent is?
Mostly like play in the snow.
Okay.
It's a little sledding.
Assuming there is snow.
Assuming there is
Yeah.
snow. If the fire department issues them a permit to have a fire, they would have a fire. But they would coordinate that with the fire department
I
and
could
us.
think of many worse organizations to trust doing this. So I'm okay with
I was
it.
going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
We ride up there regularly, so I'm just concerned about making sure that when they leave, it's the way it was when they arrived, which is generally not an issue, but
Yeah, that's one of their cardinal rules, right? That you leave it.
Oh, yeah, leave no trace.
Leave it better than it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I said, that's why I'm not too overly concerned with them going to this group.
mhm.
And Chase, they've been up there a few times before. I know within the last maybe 10 years. Do you know where they typically park? Because I know the parking area is only 4 cars wide.
I actually don't, but I'll get an answer to that and make sure that that's part of the application.
They've gotten access to get past that gate to get up there.
Oh, perfect.
If they open the gate, they can drive up.
Yeah, we've got a key. The water department's got a key, and I think highway, it's all daisy chained. So I can't remember. It might have been us the last time they went up there, or the water department, but they get up there.
Perfect.
Well, then you guys will see an application in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good.
Cool.
January is not usually a time we like to ride. It's too cold.
Last administrative item was an update on Healy Corner to the extent that we might have one.
Oh boy, Healy Corner. Not much of an update. Amy was trying to get them to come in soon because it's just been so long. I don't believe we even have quorum to vote on it.
I think we're close to quorum to vote on that.
Yeah, so
Is there a reason why they have been so delayed in coming back? Because they were gung ho there for a long time, and
there's been court issues, if I'm correct. I really don't know much about the property. That was before my time.
yeah, I mean, it
2.5 years.
Yeah, it definitely ended up in court with the zoning laws and regulations. Was the last thing I'd heard. Right, they were talking about lot sizes and the different types of development that should be going in there, could be going in there. So,
no,
but I only ask because there are 2 massive stockpiles of material
yeah,
pretty close to the roadway right now. I'm not saying they're going into the resource area or anything like that, but there's a presence there now that hadn't been.
Yeah, Amy has been in contact with GPR about it, although I don't think we've got much of an answer at this point.
Okay. Kyle, you were the one that brought this up. Do you think it makes sense to maybe ask Tim and Amy to put a little more pressure on them to have somebody here in 2 weeks?
I think, and it sounds like they have been trying. I do think that it's time, right? Or you just got to know. I guess they're in the grand scheme of things. It doesn't matter. They can just say, "Hey, you're gonna have to submit it. Here's the bottom line. Come in and tell us what's going on, or it's a new NOI." Because here's where the commission's at. We don't have quorum to discuss the originally scoped project, and there's no chance that it's going to be the same as what they presented 3 years ago anyway, right? So I think the bottom line is we're looking at a new application, so it might not matter, but then maybe telling them that will lit a little fire.
Yeah, you just get them off our list. And
Yeah, that's kind of every time I see the agenda.
Yeah,
come up.
move them off the bottom and put them back on the top, kind of thing. One thing that may be helpful here is a point of contact from the Conservation Commission to sort of be on the emails between Tim and Amy and the applicant. Just add a little bit of like, hey, no, we're serious. Like, get your stuff sorted out. Who would like to be the at least preliminary point of contact for helping Tim and Amy wrangle this and stay in the loop in communication?
Is Mike waving his hand? Yes or no? Or your hand was just in your. I mean, I've been involved. I was here at the start of that when it was first introduced to us. So I assume it means Andrew and Carl were as well. But
my sense is just that this is going to be one of those projects where we're going to need like a champion, right? Someone to run point on it.
Yeah.
And it may make sense to ask that person now.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, unless Andrew or Carl are looking for more work.
Okay. Kyle, it is. So Tim, as you communicate with the applicant, can you make sure to keep Kyle in the loop on that?
Yeah, definitely. I can copy you on everything, Kyle.
Yeah, and even just like Chase said, a quick note saying we're copying Commissioner Kyle.
Yeah.
Just to bring their little attention.
Yep, just a little extra poke.
Yep.
Hey, Chase, I got another. I was wondering before we close, since the selectmen are bringing up our lot 107, is there any update on the current lease that went out for the RFP?
Not that I am aware of. Andrew, you're sometimes, around town hall every once in a while. Any sense of what's going on there?
So I haven't heard anything concrete either in terms of an update. I'll have to check around tomorrow and see if there's anything new going on. But
yeah,
okay.
The last I heard that they were going through another round of negotiations with the potential applicant or potential leaseholder. So,
Well, and I'll add to that, just as we were discussing this, the chair of the select board texted me and asked me if they could push our discussion with them off from the 13th to the 27th.
Any particular reason?
Yeah.
He didn't give me a reason. He wanted to chat about it tomorrow. Let me chat with him and see where we're at.
Are we going to end up at town meeting again?
that's where my head went. We're not going to.
I do wonder if it's part of this negotiation. They're trying to get stuff sorted out. So stay tuned. Let me understand the reason, and I'll follow up with an email to everyone with what I come to understand. Or rather, I will follow up with an email to Tim and Amy that they can circulate.
What's the deadline for the warrant? April something?
February.
No, yeah, it's
Oh, is it February?
It's early. Yeah, I think it's mid-February. I'll have to double check the date, but it's very early this year.
Ouch. So we won't have had a discussion with them before they have to close the warrant, or at least have a placeholder in there.
They could put a placeholder, but yeah, the fine details of it
Right.
kind of.
Let me talk with Mark tomorrow, and we'll see where we get to.
All right, that sounds reasonable.
Okay. Anything else to bring up? Okay. Thank you, Tim, for running everything tonight. I think we're ready for a motion.
I move that we close the meeting.
Second. All right. Roll call vote. Carl.
Carl Melberg, guy.
Chase.
Chase Gerbic, aye.
Michael.
Michael Livingston, aye.
Ed.
At full side.
Kyle.
Maxfield, aye.
And myself, aye. It's unanimous. Good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
All right.
Thank you.